The King of Fighters, SNK's biggest gaming franchise, has taken the world by storm in the 90s and continues to be an important part of today's fighting game world. But how did this beloved series came to be? And how did it evolve and survive to remain one of the best fighting games out there? Join us as we travel back in time and dive deep in the history of the King of Fighters. The early 90s was an era seen by many as the golden age and resurrection of the video game industry. While many young players were enjoying quality playtime from the comfort of their homes, others were focused on the competitive side of gaming at the arcades, specifically as it was the time of the rise of fighting games. The successful release of Street Fighter II by Capcom in 1992 ushered a desire by many other gaming companies to enter this new genre of gaming. And while many have tried, only one company will go down as the true rival of Capcom in its Street Fighter titles, and that is of course Shin Nihon Kikaku, also known as SNK. SNK was not new to gaming. The company have made some very successful arcade games in the late 70s and early 80s, like Vanguard and Ikari Warriors. And after making profits porting their old games to the then very popular NES system, the company would decide to enter the home and hardware market with a bang, as they introduced their new hardware in 1990 known as the Neo Geo. The Neo Geo was designed as both an arcade system in the form of the Neo Geo MVS as well as a home console in the form of the Neo Geo AES. Both hardware used the same components, offering for the first time the ability to have arcade-level graphics and gameplay at home. With its brand new system now released in the arcades, SNK saw potential in the new 1 vs 1 fighting genre, and was so willing to bet on this new type of games that it greenlit a number of projects that would use the idea of versus fighting and even try to evolve it further. By 1993, these included the first Fatal Fury game, which was released around the same time as Capcom's Street Fighter II, as well as Art of Fighting. The success of these games allowed SNK to follow with Fatal Fury 2, Samurai Showdown, Fatal Fury Special, and Art of Fighting 2. While neither the Fatal Fury nor Art of Fighting series reached the level of popularity of Street Fighter, the two franchises were considered a hit and introduced gamers to powerful new characters and stories, like Terry and Andy Bogard, Ryo Sakazaki, Robert Garcia, and many other warriors. Fatal Fury Special, which was SNK's latest release title in 1993, received rave reviews for its large cast, great gameplay, and stunning graphics. But one particular, somewhat hidden feature that made Fatal Fury Special the subject of many articles and discussions back in the day was the inclusion of a guest character from another franchise, Ryo Sakazaki. Protagonist of SNK's other flagship fighting game Art of Fighting, Ryo was a hidden boss in Fatal Fury Special. Players who are able to reach and defeat the final boss of the game, Wolfgang Krauser, without losing a single round would get a final match against Ryo. The great reception this hidden battle generated had prompted SNK to decide on crossing over characters from its two fighting game series into a new title. While both Fatal Fury and Art of Fighting are fighting games, the original idea for the crossover title was a beat-em-up side-scrolling game called Survivor. The title would feature the ability to control a team of warriors as they scroll through the streets of Southtown to beat various enemies. However, the idea was quickly scrapped before any sprite work even begun, as SNK decided to change the genre of the game from a beat-em-up to a fighting game, and the title from Survivor to the King of Fighters. The title of which was that of the main fighting game tournament in the Fatal Fury and Art of Fighting series and lore. But instead of bringing a new traditional 1 versus 1 fighting game, SNK decided to break the mold and create a team battle fighting game, where 3 characters would fight 3 contenders. Something never heard of before. To achieve this very bright idea of a crossover game, SNK put a dream team to develop the ambitious title. After the massive success of the Fatal Fury series and Capcom's Street Fighter before it, SNK wanted to bring back the father of modern fighting games, Takashi Nishiyama, and gave him the role of executive producer, supervising the entire dream team behind the project. As for the role of director, the company decided on Masanori Kawasashi to be in charge of the King of Fighters game. Kawasashi will later be known as the mind behind the Tenchu 3D action series. Joining Kawasashi are a number of talented designers, including Toyohisa Tanabe, Haruo Tomita, Sanichi Morioka, and Yoshisi Hashimoto. Lead designer Toyohisa Tanabe has been with SNK since 1989 and worked on many of the company's Neo Geo titles, like Baseball Stars Professional, Alpha Mission 2, Battle Chopper, and the Auto Fighting games. He is often considered one of the most important parts of the team, as he also worked on gameplay mechanics and will continue to do so for many KOF titles. Joining Toyohisa, Shinichi Morioka was tasked with character designs. While the original idea had characters from only Fatal Fury and Auto Fighting Collide, as work began on the King of Fighters, SNK decided to bring in other characters from old series, as well as bring new fighters into the fold. Work on the King of Fighters 94 has begun, and many ideas of new characters as well as design works are underway. A big challenge for the King of Fighters development team was to create characters that could stand against established ones like Terry and Ryo in terms of design, charisma, and story. And one particular difficult task was to find and create a new protagonist for the series. SNK decided that the game, now officially titled The King of Fighters 94, will have a roster of 8 teams, each team made of 3 fighters and representing a different country. When designing the protagonist for the game, developers wanted a new hip hero who would easily rival the Fatal Fury and Auto Fighting characters in style. This of course led to the creation of Kyo Kusanagi. Through most of the game's development, Kyo was known as Seo Kirishima and was dressed in martial arts clothing common with fighting games at the time. But late in production, his name became Kyo Kusanagi, likely due to the King of Fighters story's change in direction towards the adaptation of the Yamata no Orochi legend, which we will talk about at length in future episodes. When designing Seo, SNK designer Shinichi Morioka used Shotaro Kaneda from the Akira manga as inspiration. Other influences included Joe Yabuki and Akira Fudo from the respective series Ashita no Joe and Devilman. While in charge of designing the character, Yuichiro Hiraki sought to contrast Kyo with Street Fighter character Ryu. He considered the character to be an overwhelming rival, or a wall. He believed the latter was a popular character that couldn't be surpassed in the same field, so he made Kyo's characterization and design contrast Ryu, so he could benefit from appealing to a broad demographic. He wanted Kyo to be a character who dislikes training and was strong due to natural talent. Now, since this was a team fighting game of 3 versus 3, SNK also had the challenging task to come up with 2 more characters that would constitute the heroic Japan team. The second character to join Kyo was his soon-to-become best friend Benimaru Nikaido, an eccentric character with electrifying powers. His design was loosely based on the character of Polnareff from the then very popular JoJo Bizarre Adventure manga. Even after Benimaru's name was decided, the game developers continued to refer to him as Polnareff. As for the third character of the protagonist team, the designers wanted to create a judo athlete who uses dynamic body tosses. Despite the criticisms, the creators were very adamant that Daimon would fight with his Japanese geta, and thus the character of Goro Daimon was born. The idea of Kyo's flames, Benimaru's lightning, and Goro's earth powers, which can all be seen as some sort of elemental powers, was derived from the anime Geta Robot. In the show, there were 3 featured heroes who served as the inspiration for the King of Fighters trio. The protagonist had a fiery persona, his friend was edgy and daring, and the third hero was the down-to-earth giant. It is also an homage to a Japanese old phrase of giving birth to fire, roughly translated as lightning strikes the earth which sparks the flames, hinting at the King of Fighters trio working together to defeat the villains. The story of the team had Kyo Kusanagi recently meeting both Benimaru Nikaido and Goro Daimon at the Japan Fighting Tournament, where Kyo came first, followed closely by Benimaru then Goro. Due to their achievement in this tournament, the 3 warriors received an invitation to enter the new King of Fighters tournament. At the time of the King of Fighters 94, the Orochi plot, which will constitute a big part of the franchise's detailed story, was not developed yet, as the idea of it did not originate until late in the development of the game. Thus, the Japan team's story, or specifically Kyo Kusanagi's story, was quite vague in this first title. The second team that would be seen as the secondary protagonist team is none other than Team Fatal Fury, made of Terry Bogard, Andy Bogard, and Joe Higashi. Terry's popularity was through the roof as Fatal Fury Special was still very popular in the arcades at the time. The designers wanted to keep Terry's image of a strong fighter intact. His moves were the same as Fatal Fury Special. Andy, on the other hand, saw a massive upgrade to one of his moves, the super special Shore Padan, which now became a lot easier to perform and harder to avoid. As for Joe Higashi, the Muay Thai fighter saw the biggest graphical update. Joe makes a big toothy grin during his win pose. Funnily enough, the designers had Joe show many missing teeth while grinning. However, they felt that the character's fans will be sad and upset to see him in such a state and decided to fill those missing teeth at the last minute before submitting the final version of the game. The story of Team Fatal Fury has Terry Bogard, the winner of the last 2 King of Fighters tournaments, learn about the new contest along with his brother Andy and close friend Joe while in a vacation. Thinking that either Geese Howard or Wolfgang Krauser might be behind this new event, they decide to enter the King of Fighters 94 as the Fatal Fury team representing Italy. Next comes the Auto Fighting team, made of Ryo Sakazaki, Robert Garcia, and Takuma Sakazaki. Unlike the Fatal Fury team, the Auto Fighting characters were very difficult to balance, since their moves in the respective game were very strong and required a stamina meter to perform. The developers decided to make these powerful moves slightly weaker than the Auto Fighting games, but even with that, they turned out quite the strong team. SNK was keen to use the newly created character from Auto Fighting 2, Yuri Sakazaki, with Ryo and Robert forming a Kyokugen karate team. But since Yuri shifted to the women's team, as we will see later, Takuma, Ryo, and Yuri's father was chosen to complete the Mexico team. Their story focuses on Takuma wanting to prove his Kyokugen style of karate, ordering his students, Ryo and Robert, to join him and form the Mexico team. Ryo, on the other hand, is angry at Yuri, who ran off to team up with 2 other female fighters and entered the tournament without the consent of their father. At the start of development, SNK decided to have a British team made of King, Billy Khan, and Big Bear. The latter proved to be difficult to adapt to the King of Fighters game at the time and was causing memory issues with the ROM. At the same time, Yuri Sakazaki was, as previously mentioned, very well received through Auto Fighting 2, and developers decided to scrap Big Bear in favor of Yuri Sakazaki. At that point, SNK noticed that they have a team with 2 females and wondered whether it would be better to make this an all-women fighters team, and thus Billy Khan was scrapped in favor of the very popular Mai Shiranui. The team story has both Yuri and Mai quite frustrated that they cannot join a team with the people they wanted, Ryo for Yuri and Andy for Mai, so they decide to meet with King and ask her to form a team together, to which she agreed, forming the England team. While King of Fighters 94 was originally set to pit characters from only Fatal Fury and Art of Fighting series, the idea evolved to bring characters from other non-fighting games made previously by SNK. One particular game which was very famous in the late 80s is the Psycho Soldier game. The popular side-scroller featured a heroine by the name of Athena, as she travels through different lands with her trusted friend C. Kensu to rid the world from evil monsters and restore peace. SNK decided to bring both Athena and Kensu to the King of Fighters 94 with a design overhaul. Many fans expected Athena to have her school uniform, but SNK decided that it would be too nostalgic, and after going through multiple possible variations, they decided to go with a traditional looking costume, but made sure to have a nod to the school uniform in her character intro. As for Kensu, the designers felt that he was overshadowed in the Athena game and wanted to give him a cool overlook that would make him popular with the female audience. For the third member of Team China, the developers wanted to have a character with a unique fighting style. One particular style that SNK wanted to try was the Drunken Fist fighting style, made popular back then by the Jackie Chan movie Drunken Master. Thus, the idea of making this third fighter as the master of Athena and Kensu was decided, and Shin Gensai was created. The story of Team China has the legendary master Shin Gensai receiving a letter inviting him to the tournament, so he decides to enter to test his 2 pupils, C. Kensu and the pop star named Athena Asamiya. Similar to SNK bringing Athena and Kensu from the Psycho Soldier games, the King of Fighters 94 developers decided to bring some other characters from another popular arcade machine from the 80s, the Ikari Warriors. This 1986 run-and-gun vertical scrolling game was the second highest grossing arcade machine in 1986 and made several sequels and ports outside of the arcade. The 2 playable heroes of Ikari Warriors, Ralph Jones and Clark Still, were chosen to transition to the King of Fighters 94. Early designs showed that both characters were to have the same attire and style from the Ikari Warriors game, but SNK wanted to update the outfits to fit the era, and thus shirtless Raph and Clark were abandoned for the more stylish and unique versions they now have. SNK later decided to give Clark sunglasses to further differentiate the 2. For the third character of the team, SNK brought the leader of the Ikari Warriors, Hyder. Hyder made the first unnamed cameo in the intro of Ikari Warriors 3, and the King of Fighters 94 developers decided to expand his role and even gave him a tragic story. Few years before the start of the tournament, Hyder's wife and daughter, along with his entire military squad, were murdered at the hands of the game's boss, Rugal. Hyder himself even lost an eye as he tried to avenge his family, and Rugal let him live as a way to humiliate him. Years later, now a leader of the mercenary group the Ikari Warriors, Hyder received an invitation to the King of Fighters tournament, so he decides to bring his 2 top operatives, Ralph and Clark, and represents Team Brazil. Early in development, SNK wanted a team fully made of prisoners. First was the massively large Chan Kohan, using a chain ball as a weapon. His first design had him in a typical striped prison clothes, but creating all the graphics with that kind of stripe pattern was too difficult, so SNK changed his outfit to plain white cloth with a skull and crossbones mark. But that also turned out to be problematic, which led to Chang getting his tunic and chains iconic design. The second character is Troy Bounge, a reference to the Freddy Krueger character from the Nightmare on Elm Street movie. His early design was too close to Freddy that SNK decided to tool it down a little in order to avoid any copyright issues in the overseas market. So about a month before the game was due, Choi's design changed to something more plain, as well as added suspenders. For the third character, SNK tried different designs to complete the prisoner's team, but due to various circumstances, it was decided to add Kim Cap-1 to the team. Kim was very popular at the time due to the great reception the character received in Fatal Fury 2 and Fatal Fury Special. The fact that Kim joined up with two criminals was seen problematic inside SNK, and thus the background story of Kim rehabilitating criminals came to be. So the story of the team starts with one day Kim watching the news on TV and saw that the known criminal Chung Ko-han had broken out of jail. Kim decided to head into the town in the middle of the night in search of Chang to teach him a lesson. It was then that Choi tried to attack him, but Kim easily defeated both villains and offered them a way for redemption, join his team for the King of Fighters, and prove that they can change. Early on, SNK also wanted to bring a boxer character to the King of Fighters 94, one unlike anything seen before. While typically boxer characters in fighting games were all dressed up as professional boxers, this new character will have stylish clothing and no boxing gloves. His name was decided to be Heavy D as a direct nod to the Heavy D and Boys musical group. An exclamation mark was added to Heavy D's name to protect the company against any kinds of lawsuits. The second character that would go on Team USA was Lucky Glauber, a basketball player and also a fighter. Lucky's entire idea was influenced by the character of Hakim from the 1978 Bruce Lee movie Game of Death. Originally, Lucky was designed as an African-American man who is obsessed with Japanese culture, but as his design got updated and the developers added his American clothes and appearance, it no longer made sense for him to be a Japanophile, so the idea was dropped. The third character is the football player Brian Battler. Surprisingly, his idea and design were there long before many other important characters of the title. Initially, he wore a helmet and a chest guard with bolts sticking out all over it, but those were removed and his design simplified. Since the character's story has him have no experience in fighting, the game developers made it apparent by having the character unable to hit with a straight leg in any of his kicks. The story of Team USA has Lucky Glauber informing his friend Heavy D about the King of Fighters tournament. Although happy that he'll finally get a good fight after a long time, both are stumped about who could be the last member of their team. That's when they notice the TV showcasing a football player named Brian Butler. They decide to invite Brian to join them in the King of Fighters as the American sports team, representing USA. Other teams and characters were considered for the King of Fighters 94. This included the circus team, a rappers team, an evil snake controlling team, and even a team of therianthropes, made of characters that are half human, half animal. But ultimately, it was the previously mentioned 8 teams that were chosen to make the roster of the King of Fighters 94. As for the game's final boss, SNK was always known for difficult and strong bosses in their games, and the King of Fighters 94 was no exception. Since the work on the King of Fighters 94 started, the developers wanted to make the biggest, baddest, and most evil boss ever created. Rugal Bernstein was designed to be such a character. Initially, he would be able to use any move he saw. But this idea was scrapped due to memory limitations, and instead the boss was given some moves from other SNK bosses, like Giz's Reppuken and Krauser's Kaiser Wave. His story was still being developed in the King of Fighters 94. He was a black market arms dealer who is interested in collecting strong fighters, defeating them and turning them into bronze statues. His story would be expanded further with the following game. Since the King of Fighters is a crossover between different franchises, SNK wanted the gameplay to also share similarities between other SNK fighting games. As previously mentioned, the King of Fighters 94 is a 3 vs 3 fighting game. Once the player chooses one of the 8 available teams, he or she will then choose the order of each of the 3 members. If the first member is defeated by one of the other team's members, the next member will come in to fight the winner, and will go on until all three members of one team are defeated. The gameplay utilizes many elements from the Fatal Fury franchise, such as the infinite special moves as well as super moves and the dashes. It also borrows the abilities to charge your special meters similar to the auto fighting series. KOF 94 also features a sidestep system. By pressing A+B, the player will dodge incoming attacks. When the life bar is flashing red, or if the special meter is at max, the player can unleash a super move with devastating damage. When the player chosen defeats all the other teams, the characters are transported to an aircraft carrier where they meet the game's final boss, Rugal Bernstein. Once defeated, Rugal self-destructs his ship in an effort to kill the winning team, but ends up, seemingly, only killing himself. While the King of Fighters franchise is known for its robust storytelling and detailed lore, the King of Fighters 94 is an exception, as SNK did not come up with the game's intricate story until very late in the development. While the King of Fighters 94 gameplay was very deep and original, one other aspect that would push the game into more fame is its graphics. The game's visual presentation was on another level. KOF 94 had great character designs and advanced animations not seen in any other fighting game at the time, and a big step forward from even the highly praised Fatal Fury Special and Samurai Showdown 2. SNK would even push the envelope further by including stage intros, adding more hype and excitement around the fights. Because the King of Fighters 94 is a team versus game, the developers had to think about the team members who are not fighting. This led SNK to push the graphical and memory capabilities of the Neo Geo to its limits and have the non-playing characters spectating the match, cheering for their team member, and even being called in specific situations. To keep the bar high when it comes to presentation, the developers decided early on that each win would be commemorated with a beautiful dramatic enemy loss followed by a splash image of the winning team with the character who ended the match in the middle. This added a lot of personality to the game. Sound-wise, SNK used the Neo Geo hardware's advanced capabilities at the time to create a memorable soundtrack, effects, and voices for the King of Fighters 94. Some of the game tunes were remixes from the previous work, like Auto Fighting for the Mexico team or Fatal Fury for the Italy team. While we now know that the King of Fighters 94 was a game changer for the genre and for SNK, things were not looking good during development. Due to the then massive cast and that the game is a team-based fighter, balancing the King of Fighters 94 proved difficult. Coupled with the fact that the developer had only 2 weeks to balance the game before shipping it, it fell mostly upon Tanabe Toyohisa to balance the game on a trial and error aspect. And since there was no option to edit the teams, Tanabe and SNK approached each team as they would a single character in another franchise, thinking that each King of Fighters character is only 1/3 of the team. This approach proved to be successful, as the King of Fighters 94 was considered upon its release as a balanced fighting game. But balance was not the only issue that threatened the King of Fighters 94. Throughout the difficult developing cycle, many SNK internal staff members did not have faith in the game. Some felt the designs of the characters and stages were bland, and others even expected that SNK would cancel the game before release. What made things worse was that the company sent an early build to the then very popular and highly regarded Gamist magazine for an early preview and to announce the release date for the game. But instead of hyping the game, the Gamist magazine staff were not very enthusiastic about the new King of Fighters 94. This was a difficult time for the young King of Fighters 94 developers team, as they had spent a difficult 2-year period developing this new game, and to see both internal and external opinion not being positive was very difficult to accept. As the game was approaching release, SNK decided to organize a location test in its Neo Geo Land Arcade Center, and as it will turns out, this event changed everything. Following the not very positive Gamist magazine article about the King of Fighters 94, the developers were expecting the worst from this location test. But the reception the game received was beyond positive. It seemed that players resonated with SNK's new franchise, as the queues to play and test the game were some of the longest for its kind. This gave a huge confidence boost to the King of Fighters 94 developing team. King of Fighters 94 was released on the 25th of August in 1994 for the Neo Geo MVS arcade system. A Neo Geo AES home version was followed on October 1st, and then a Neo Geo CD with arranged soundtrack was released on November 1st. Just as the arcades were full with players lining up to play the new King of Fighters 94, Neo Geo AES and Neo Geo CD owners lined up outside game stores to buy the home version of KOF 94.
100メガショックネオジオいい加減に本当にって言ってくださいよお願いしますよあなんか落としましたああ皆さんこれをよーく皆さんこれが噂のキングオブファイターその噂は本当だった SNK 歴代の人気キャラが総登場テーマ待望夢のチームバトルザ・キングオブファイターズ94ネオジオ CD で新発売ついに真相が SNK
The game received rave reviews and a massive positive reception when released. In fact, according to Japanese Game Machine magazine, only 2 months after its release, the King of Fighters 94 became the second most popular title of the entire year. The game was also awarded the title of Best Game of 1994 in the 8th annual Grand Prize by the arcade magazine Gamist. Internationally, Electronic Gaming Monthly gave the King of Fighters 94 its Game of the Year award in the categories Best Fighting Game and Best Neo Geo Game of 1994. While critics both in and outside Japan all praised the game's deep gameplay, graphics, and ambience, they all disliked the inability to edit your team, a complaint that SNK took to heart and intended to fix in the next iteration. Ironically, even with all its popularity, the King of Fighters 94 did not get a home console port outside of the Neo Geo. The reason remained unclear. While some blame the high graphics and memory requirement of the game, others state that 1994 was the time where console gaming was getting ready for the next generation of the 32-bit hardware, and many developers were focused on the next gen of gaming. Even though SNK was at the time investing in anime adaptation of their properties, with the likes of the Fatal Fury, Samurai Showdown, and Auto Fighting anime, King of Fighters 94 would not see such treatment and will only get an adaptation until 2017 with the King of Fighters Destiny CGI anime adapting the plot of the first game. As for mangas, many books were released featuring the King of Fighters 94. While many of them were humor-centric comas, 2 titles were treated as a serious adaptation of the title. The first is the King of Fighters 94 Gaiden by Ryo Takamisaki. This 6-part manga adapts the game from the perspective of the women fighters team of Mai, Yuri, and King. The second manga, which is made of 4 volumes, is titled The King of Fighters 94 and is by Tatsuya Shingyoji. This series focuses on the Italy team of Terry, Andy, and Joe, making them the true heroes and winners of the tournament, rather than the canonical Japan team of Kyo, Benimaru, and Goro. The King of Fighters 94 proved to be a massive success for SNK, and what was supposed to be a one-off fun crossover event will soon become a worldwide gaming sensation and a series that would span decades of chapters and sequels. Join us in the next episode as we dive deep in some of the sequels of the King of Fighters series.